Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today's reciters are Gaurangi Gopi Mataji in Sanskrit and Pati Mataji in English from Canto 3, Chapter 23, verses 1 to 15. Gaurangi Gopi Mataji, when you're ready, please start with the invocation. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Canto 3, Chapter 23, Text 1 to 15. Maitreya Vacha Pitrubhyam prastite sadvi patimin gati Govindam nityam paryacharat pritya bhavani va bhavam prabhum.
Maitreya continued, after the departure of her parents, the chaste woman, Devahuti, who could understand the desires of her husband, served him constantly with great love, as Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva, serves her husband.
Text 2. Vashambrin ma suchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushya shahardena Vacha madhuraya cha bohu.
O Vidura, Devahuti served her husband with intimacy and great respect, with control of the senses, with love, and with sweet words.
Text 3. Virshajya kamam dambham cha dvisham lobham aghamadam apramota datyata nityam tejinam sam atoshayat.
Working sanely and diligently, she pleased her very powerful husband, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities, and vanity.
Text 4 to 5. Saveda Rashi Varyastam Manavim Samanuvratam Daivat Gariya Shahapatyur Asha Sanam Mahashi Saha Kalena Bhuyashak Shamam Karshitam Vrata Charyaya Prema Gadgadaya Vacha Vedataha Kripaya Bravit.
The daughter of Manu, who was fully devoted to her husband, looked upon him as greater even than Providence. Thus, she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of celestial sages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love.
Text 6. Kartama uvacha tushtoham adyatava manavi mandayaha shushrusaya paramaya paraya cha bhaktya yodhinam ayamativa shuhrut sadeho navekshitaha samuchitaha kshapitum madarte.
Kardama Muni said, O respectful daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, today I am very much pleased with you for your great devotion and most excellent loving service. Since the body is so dear to embodied beings, I am astonished that you have neglected your own body to use it on my behalf.
Text 7. Ye meshva dharma nirtashya tapah samadhi vidyatma yoga vichata bhagavat prashadaha tadevatai mad anushvan nayavarudhahan dristim prapashya vitrami abhayan ashokan.
Kardama Muni continued, I have achieved the blessings of the Lord in discharging my own religious life in austerity, meditation, and Krishna consciousness. Although you have not yet experienced these achievements, which are free from fear and lamentation, I shall offer them all to you because you are engaged in my service. Now just look at them. I am giving you the transcendental vision to see how nice they are.
Text 8. Anye punar bhagavato bruva udvijrambha vibramshitartha rochanaha kimuru kramasya siddha sibhun krusha vidhava nija dharma dohan divyan nare duradhigan ripa vikriyam bihi.
Gandhama Muni continued, what is the use of enjoyments other than the Lord's grace? All material achievements are subject to be annihilated simply by the movement of the eyebrows of Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By your principles of devotion to your husband, you have achieved and can enjoy transcendental gifts very rarely obtained by persons proud of aristocracy and material possessions.
Text 9. Evam Pravan Abhalakhila Yogamaya Vidya Vichakshaname Vikshya Gatadhirashit Samprashraya Pranaya Vihvalaya Girishat Vrida Valoka Vilasadha Shitananaha.
Upon hearing the speaking of her husband, who excelled in knowledge of all kinds of transcendental science, innocent Devahuti was very satisfied. Her smiling face shining with a slightly bashful glance, she spoke in a choked voice because of great humility and love.
Text 10. Devahuti Ruvacha Radham Batadvijavarshita Damokha Yoga Maya Dhipe Tvai Vibhuta Davaimi Bharataha Yasthe Vyadhai Samayaha Sakridanga Sango Bhuyad Gari Yashi Gunaha Prashavaha Satinam.
Sri Devahuti said, my dear husband, O best of Brahmanas, I know that you have achieved perfection and are the master of all the infallible mystic powers because you are under the protection of Yogamaya, the transcendental nature. But you once made a promise that our bodily union should now fulfill, since children are a great quality for a chaste woman who has a glorious husband.
Text 11. Tatreti krityamupashiksha yathopadesham yeneshi me krashito tiriramashyayatamam siddhitate kritam manobhavadrarishitaya dhinastadisha bhavanam sadrasham vichaksva.
Devahuti continued, my dear Lord, I am struck by excited emotion for you. Therefore, kindly make what arrangements must be made according to the scriptures, so that my skinny body, emaciated through unsatisfied passion, may be rendered fit for you. Also, my Lord, please think of a suitable house for this purpose.
Text 12. Matrevacha Priyayaha Priyamanvichan Karnatamo Yogamashtitaha Vimanam Kamagam Kshatas Tarhi Eva Virachikarat.
Maitreya continued, O Vidura, seeking to please his beloved wife, the sage Kardama exercised his yogic power and instantly produced an aerial mansion that could travel at his will.
Exciting. Sarva Kama Sugam Divyam Sarvaratna Samanvitam Sarvatri Upachayudarkam Manistambhair Upaskritam.
It was a wonderful structure, bedecked with all sorts of jewels, adorned with pillars of precious stones, and capable of yielding whatever one desired. It was equipped with every form of furniture and wealth, which tended to increase in the course of time.
Text 14 to 15. Divyopakaranopetam sarvakala shukhavaham patikabhir patakabhir विचित्रभिरलङ्कृताम् श्रग्भिर्विचित्रमाल्यभिर्मनुज्यशिञ्जत् सदङ्घ्रिभिः दुःखलक्षमाकुशैः ज्ञानां वस्त्रैर्विराजिताम्.
The castle was fully equipped with all necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing in all seasons. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colors. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees, and with tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, you completed the recitation, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji, it was up to text 15, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Wonderful recitation. I'm not facilitating today, but I'm here to introduce Bhaja Govindam Prabhu, who is, I think, is coming for the first time to facilitate. So I wanted to do an introduction. So welcome, dear devotees, to today's chat session. Before I hand over to Bhaja Govinda Prabhu, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce him to the devotees. For those who do not know Prabhu, he's well known in the devotee community. He gives classes regularly at the School of Bhakti and at the temple here at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and also at the Radha Krishna Temple in Soho, London. So Bhaja Govinda Prabhu is a disciple of Kadamba Khan, His Holiness Kadamba Khan and Maharaj. And he is a graduate of Natural Sciences of the University of Cambridge, majoring in maths and physics. He is a spiritual seeker, and he's seeking brought him into contact with the Krishna consciousness movement while he was working on a project in the US. And immediately it took a liking to the temple deities, the association of the devotees, and of course the whole philosophy of Bhakti Yoga. And he found out that this answered many of his unanswered questions in life. Now, as I mentioned, he serves in various capacities. As a teacher at the School of Bhakti, he offers the school course. He teaches at the course on the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he's involved in systematically presenting Krishna consciousness in various fields. He continues to work in the corporate world as a lead solutions architect. So Bhaja Govindam Prabhu, thank you for giving your association to this forum of devotees. This is a forum that dates back all the way to 2020, started in COVID. First we did Bhagavad Gita, and then we started the Bhagavatam. Now we've moved on into the third canto. Wonderful group of devotees, extremely dedicated, and I'm sure they'll really value your association and your presentation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Just start with Mangacharan. Magyana-timirandasya gyananjana-shlakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Deep Swapatantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Gaurvani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyapati Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shabbat ki jai. Thank you so much for having me, dear devotees. And it's just my camera on. It will be nice if devotees can turn your cameras on. I appreciate time of day, so dinner, probably putting kids to sleep, etc. But if you can, I do like seeing faces. But yes, thank you for a wonderful recitation to Goringu Gopi Mataji and Pativyas Mataji. So that was really nice and really appreciated. So the verses I got given were verses 3 till 6 of Canto 3, chapter 23. And just to do a bit of a recap in terms of where we're at in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, right? So in Canto 3, we started the pastime of Gardamamuni and Devahuti, where in a few chapters ago, chapters previously, we hear about how Gardamamuni had actually performed a lot of penances, a lot of austerities. He was in meditation for almost 10,000 years, it's described. And he was doing this, meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with in a desire of having a wife that can support his spiritual endeavors. And during that meditation, or after that meditation, the Lord came to him himself and said, actually, you know what, Kadamamuni, I understand your desire. I understand exactly what you're after. And I've already arranged it. I've already arranged for you to have a wife of like disposition who will be perfectly suited to support you in your devotional practices. And then what we hear is a couple of days later, Swayambhuva Manu, the emperor of the entire universe, he comes with his wife Shatarupa and his daughter Devahuti. And we hear how Swayambhuva Manu was actually traveling the world in order to find a suitable partner for his daughter Devahuti. And when he came to Gardamuni's ashram, then he and Gardamuni spoke, and he explained that actually Devahuti is very interested in you, having heard about you from the saints, and so please marry my daughter Devahuti. And Gardamuni listened to all of this, he heard everything, and he agreed. He agreed to the marriage, but he had one condition. And that condition was that as soon as Devahuti bears my semen, i.e., as soon as Devahuti is pregnant with my child, I will leave. I will leave in order to focus on my devotional services. I.e., if we understand in terms of ashrams, then he's looking at Vanaprastha sannyas as soon as the child is born. And Devahuti, Kardamuni, Shatarupa, they're looking at each other and they agree. They agree that Kardamuni is a saintly personality. He knows the principles of dharma and he wishes to follow that. And so we hear how Kardamuni and Devahuti get married. And in the last few verses of chapter 22, so the previous chapter, we read about Swayambhuva Manu, how he goes back with Shatarupa to look after the kingdom, to rule the kingdom. And he does so in a very spiritual way where he's constantly in contact and in meditation of the Supreme Lord in different ways. He's writing, he's listening, he's engaging in services, in worship and all these things. And he's also engaging his citizens in the same way, his family and citizens. And then we start chapter 23, which is entitled, I believe it's the Lamentation. Yeah, Devahuti's Lamentation. And in the first few verses, what we read is basically this idea that Devahuti and Kardamamuni are now left in the ashram. Nobody from Devahuti's family is around anymore. But Devahuti is serving Kardamamuni with so much love, with so much intimacy, with so much respect, and using, Shukdev Goswami describes, sweet words. And the analogy used is Devahuti is serving Kardamamuni exactly like how Bhavani serves Lord Shiva. A very exalted, a very high-level example in terms of marriage and relationship and the act of service between the husband and wife. And then we enter these verses from verses 3 till 6, which are very interesting verses, especially since in the purport, Sri Prabhupada is very much presenting the qualities of a wife. And what we see through these verses, and then what we see later on in the chapter also, is the reciprocation of the wife, or reciprocation with the wife by the husband, i.e. we see how Kardamumani reciprocates with Devothi's service. And I think these verses that we've got 3 to 6 are quite a beautiful set of verses, because what we witness is an extraordinary journey of Devahuti's spiritual maturity, actually. We see that through these verses, we're presented with her astounding austerity that then is seen by Kardamumuni as her sincere service. And then Kardamumuni's heart melts, and we see how Devahuti becomes a recipient of Kardamumuni's mercy. And so if I just present my screen, we'll take each verse at a time, and we'll read out the translation, and then I'll just share a few thoughts on each of the verses. So the first one is this text 3. Work insanely and diligently, she pleased her very powerful husband, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities, and vanity. What we see here is a very interesting list of the qualities of a wife as described in this pastime. We see that Devahuti, and when we look at the purport, Srila Prabhupada very much focuses on this point of the pride, of the point or the quality of being without pride for a wife. When we look at Devahuti's life, we see that actually in quotes, her previous life before marriage, she was a daughter, she was recognized as the daughter of a great emperor, Swayambhuva Manu. And we can see that her parentage and her family were very materially exalted. And we can see that just from the last few verses of the previous chapter, how extraordinary Swayambhuva Manu's spirituality was, or his spiritual focus. We can see that Devahuti came from a very spiritually successful family too. And Devahuti herself was very spiritually involved. And when we look at this, when we look at how Devahuti in her former life as the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, and not as the wife of Kardamumuni, when we look at that, we can see that Devahuti had every opportunity to be proud of her lineage, to constantly and regularly remind Kardamumuni about how well taken care of she was, how she was a princess who never had to take up any difficulties or any struggles to live with her family. When we look at the transition that Devahuti underwent, she left a very opulent, right, materially very wealthy and well-fulfilled life. She left a very easy life. You know, as a princess, she would have many, many maidservants to help her do everything. She would probably have never had to cook. She probably never had to clean her room or anything, because she would have had maidservants to everything. She left a very nourishing environment, which was full of so many people and so many relationships. Her parents, her brothers, she had sisters, or the maidservants, her friends. She left all of that to marry Kardamumuni, who was living alone. He was living in a small hut in an ashram, and who didn't have any maidservants or any servants looking after him. And we see this situation can play out in the modern day in different ways, right? So with Devahuti and Swayambhuva Manu, we see that the very basic part was that the living condition was different when Devahuti got married. But in modern day context, we can see that, now we can see people marry from different countries. We see there's differences in culture. We see there's differences in upbringing, in family, and even in language, right? Like we can sometimes see that people get married across cultures or across backgrounds, and then there's a language barrier for the family. And when we look at all of this, what we can see is that sometimes what can happen is that the woman might come from, just like Devahuti did, from a family which was materially better than the man or than the husband. the family could be richer, the parentage could be better, right? The family relationships were closer or better. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada also talks about how the wife or the wife's family could even come from a much more spiritually opulent background, right? Where the woman comes from a devotee family and the male comes from a non-devotee family. And what can happen is that parentage can become a source of pride for many people. And that pride could be material or spiritual. It could be that I'm coming from a very rich, opulent, easy life. Or it could even be that I'm coming from a very spiritually uplifting, a very devoted family. And that pride, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, that, quote, the wife should not be proud of a parental position. Srila Prabhupada says that the wife should not be proud of the background that she comes from. Because what can happen is that when pride creeps in, this isn't just for a woman or a wife to a husband, but this is also for a husband to a wife. But when that pride creeps in, then where a relationship is meant to be two equals, two people coming together to fulfill a bigger purpose, what starts to happen is that this idea of being superior to the other person creeps in. We start showing up the person that we're with, right? So Devahuti could have very easily gone, hey, Gautam Muni, I'm coming from this very opulent, this very big background. But look what I'm doing here now. Look at how I'm having to do such menial service, such menial things. And in that way, Devahuti could have showed Gautam Muni up about her family, her richness, her spiritual superiority. And even spiritually, Srila Prabhupada says that, yes, a woman and husband may be very equal, but they should not be vainly proud about their spiritual advancement. In the prayers of Queen Kunti, we hear that how she talks about one who is very materially focused or very proud of their material situation, they can't actually approach Krishna with sincere feelings. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, verse 26, Queen Kunti says, Janmeshwarya Shuta Shribhir Edamana Madhapuman Nevarhatyabi Dhatum Ve Tvamakinchana Gocharam. My Lord, your lordship can easily be approached but only by those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty, cannot approach you with sincere feelings. Pride about one's material situation or one's material background, whether it's family, whether it's even a spiritual pride about one's spiritual background. We can see here from Queen Kunti's prayers that actually that creates a very big hurdle, a very big difficulty in approaching Krishna with sincere feelings. And in a marital relationship, it can also cause many, many problems. Because when one starts flaunting their lineage and they start asserting their superiority, which is born out of that pride, what that ends up doing is that it translates in the relationship as disrespect, as dishonor towards the other person. Where the two people are meant to come together as spouses or in Krishna consciousness, two Vaishnavas who come together, where the relationship is meant to be based on affectionate service, on mutual respect. What ends up happening is that this foundation of competition and comparison starts creeping in. And so even though Devahuti had ample opportunity to actually flaunt her heritage, what she chose instead was to take up the path of austerity and embracing the attitude of service. The path of austerity for Devahuti in this situation was not to just neglect eating or drinking and things like that, but it was actually to renounce her pride. It was to renounce her pride of coming from a very opulent background and instead embracing the service to her husband, who was a very spiritually potent personality. Even when we look at constitutionally, so if we look at modern science, constitutionally, the way married life, the way it would work with married life for a male is that a male's ability to to have emotional connection generally comes from them feeling adequate, them feeling respected, and having a sense of positive contribution in the relationship. And so if we imagine or think of a wife who is reminding the husband constantly that, oh, in my family it was like this. This is how we've done it. This is, the background I'm coming from, how amazing it was. And now I've come to this. What tends to happen is that the male can start to feel very much inadequate about their ability to provide for the wife. Because even though the male is trying their best, generally speaking, to provide, to love, to care, all these things for the wife, because of the constant reminder of how it isn't the same, what can happen is that they feel that their efforts can become unseen. And because Devahuti understood this, she understood that instead of weaponizing her background, instead of weaponizing the family heritage she comes from and demanding that Gardava Muni provides the same facilities and situation, she realized that the way to show her spiritual maturity was by practicing humility and giving Gardava Muni the space to feel valued and respected in the relationship. And so we see how Devahuti in this verse and the next few verses that we'll read, we see how Devahuti used that source of power, that source of spiritual maturity she's gathered from her life with her parents and her family to then serve very diligently her husband. And because of this, in the verse that we read, we see the word atoshayat is used. Atoshayat means that she pleased Gardava Muni. So Gardava Muni didn't become pleased by Devahuti's background or her pedigree or her entitlement as a princess. But what Gardava Muni became pleased by is the sincere service attitude that Devahuti presented. And then we come to verses 4 and 5. So the daughter of Manu, who was fully devoted to her husband, looked upon him as greater even than Providence. Thus she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of celestial sages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. What we see here, if I just highlight this, she expected great blessings from him, right? So having served Kardama Muni so nicely, what we see here, what we can take away is that as the wife is serving the husband really, really nicely, then she can expect that her husband's heart will melt and that they will reciprocate. And that's exactly what we see in the pastime. Gardama Muni's desired to reciprocate with Devahuti's selfless service. And it's an interesting description that we see because I believe in the last chapter or the chapter before, we hear about how beautiful Devahuti was. As a princess, it's described that she was so beautiful that even the denizens of heaven would fall from the airplane when they saw Devahuti. And now in this verse, we see that Devahuti is weak. She's thin, she's pale, her hair is unkempt. She's looking very rough. She's looking very, if I use a term that cannot apply to a personality like Devahuti, but very ugly, materially speaking. right? Or physically speaking. We see that this contrast is there. And despite how Devahuti looked, Kardama Muni, as it says, overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. Despite how Devahuti looked, Kardama Muni was fully in love with Devahuti because she radiated a mood of service. Devahuti's beauty was not in the way she dressed. It was not in the way that she decorated herself with ornaments, or physical ornaments like earrings and makeup and all these things. But Devahuti's beauty was in her character and specifically her service attitude towards Kardama Muni. In Canto 9, Chapter 10, when describing Sita Devi, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes a very nice what the real ornament of a woman actually is. Oftentimes, especially in modern days, like you can turn the television on, you can turn Netflix on, anything, and you see it, beauty is very much described by how one person looks, how much makeup they've got on, how they present themselves, 10 on 10, Miss World, Miss Universe, all these things. But the real beauty, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport of Canto 9, Chapter 10, verse 27, is, quote, by staying chaste and faithful to her husband, a woman enriches herself with supernatural power. The real beauty or the real ornament of a woman is not her physical beauty, but it's the chastity that they have. Physical beauty can attract the lustful eyes for a moment or for some time. But the chastity, the ornamenting the character, attracts the saintly personalities, which is why we see Ram was attracted to Sita because of Sita's chastity. We see Kardama Muni is attracted to Devahuti because of her chastity. Even though Devahuti looks very, very different to what she did as a princess, Kardama Muni's heart was still attracted to reciprocating with Devahuti's beauty because the beauty he saw was actually Devahuti's submissive and chaste character full of service. And so we see that Kardama Muni then reciprocates, as we'll see as the chapter unfolds. He wants to reciprocate with Devahuti's chastity and service attitude. And I appreciate that I'm talking about submission and chastity, being a male, and I'm just looking at the list, and we have many, many female devotees on call. Oftentimes, when we talk about submission, especially in the context of a wife, there's a big misunderstanding where submission is often taken as a wife must be submissive and the husband can do whatever they want. But that's not the case. When we talk about submission, we talk about it from the mood of an attitude of service. When the wife has an attitude of service towards the husband, then the husband has a duty to reciprocate with that service. I mean, if we just look at the Bhagavad Gita, we see Krishna says, Ye atamam prapadyante tam satevya bhajamiham. Right? As one surrenders unto me, or as one engages in service to me, then I reciprocate or reward accordingly. When Krishna, as devotees, we see Krishna is setting the example, right? Reciprocating with one's service is Krishna's motto. Then how can we as devotees, male or female, take somebody's service for granted and not reciprocate back? And so for the husband, the duty is that, yes, whilst the wife's duty is to submissively serve according to the way the Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada describe, which I'll comment on later on as well, the husband's duty is to reciprocate with that service also. Because when we look at a marriage is two people coming together to serve Krishna and serve each other. But what tends to happen is that because of the false pride, because of the false ego, we always start talking about I, me, and mine, right? So sometimes this idea of a submissive wife gets misused by males to say that, oh, see, you know, the wife should be submissive to the husband because he's thinking about I, me, mine. He's thinking about what is my enjoyment. But Prabhupada would actually oftentimes say and quote many a times in his letters, especially, that the husband and wife should live happily married and live peacefully together. He doesn't say that the husband should be happy and the wife unhappy, or that the wife should be happy and the husband unhappy. He says that the husband and wife should live happily married, or sorry, should be happily married and live peacefully together. It's this idea that the relationship is above the husband and above the wife. Happiness of the relationship is more important, or not more important, but more prevalent and more relevant than the happiness of one of the people in the relationship. And so it doesn't mean that the husband or the wife has to lose themselves in the relationship. But what it means is that there needs to be a mutual mood of sacrifice and service in a way that pleases and supports the other person. And that's what we learn here. We learn that through the example of Devahuti and Kardama Muni in these verses, and in this chapter we'll see, there's a great mood of spiritual partnership, which is built on appreciation, it's built on respect, it's built on a reciprocal service. And when that's the basis of the relationship, then we find that both husband and wife can mutually nourish each other, they can uplift each other, they can create an environment which is protective and protecting the man and the female in their own ways. And that becomes a cycle. It becomes a cycle where one person's offering service and the other appreciates it. And in turn, their heart melts a little more, and therefore they offer some service. And that reciprocation, or that cycle, is what creates that healthy relationship. I'm sure many of you are married. You can see, you have firsthand experience of this, where you do a little and the other person then wants to reciprocate and do some more of that for you. And like that, it becomes a cycle of reciprocal service. And that's what submissive service is about. That's what submission for a wife is about. It's not about the wife just listens to everything that the husband says. Actually, it's not about that at all. It's about the fact that the husband and wife are mutually serving and supporting each other through acts of service, through acts in a way that please the other person. And then I'll come to verse 6. So now Kardamuni starts to speak. Kardamuni said, "O respectful daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, today I am very much pleased with you for your great devotion and most excellent loving service. Since the body is so dear to embodied beings, I am astonished that you have neglected your own body to use it on my behalf." What we see here is how Devahuti, out of her selfless service to Kardamuni, she completely neglected herself. And that was not just recognized by Kardama Muni, but it was appreciated by Kardama Muni. All Devahuti saw was how to assist and support her husband. And Prabhupada talks about how, in the purport, about how in the relationship, it's this idea of assisting each other. In Vedic concept of life or of marriage, we have this concept of dharampati and dharampatni, right? Where the husband and wife are partners in executing dharmic activities. And of course, in Krishna consciousness, when we talk about dharmic activities, we talk about the greatest dharmic activity, right? Savepum samparo dharmo yato bhakti ratokshaje ahoitaki apriti hata yayatma suprasidati. That the greatest of all dharmic occupations or all dharmic activities is that by which one can develop loving devotional service to the Lord in a way which is unmotivated and uninterrupted, right? So that is the greatest, that is the spiritual dharmic activity that exists for all humanity, and especially for when we talk about dharampati, dharampatni, supporting each other's Krishna conscious development. But does that mean that one neglects the material duties of life? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about, or he says, quote, "It is the duty of a faithful and chaste wife to help her husband in every respect, especially when the husband is engaged in Krishna consciousness." Quote. Srila Prabhupada talks about how, or indicates rather, how it is the duty of a husband and wife to support the spiritual duties and also the material duties. Because a partnership works best when both people are coming together, where both people are supporting each other. Otherwise, what can happen is that it just becomes almost like an acquaintanceship, right? When you think of work, when you think of your work colleagues that you're not very close to, but you just work together with. You have some project, you come together, you do your own parts of the project. Once your part is done, you're like, okay, like I finished my part, I'll wait for you to finish your part, and then we can go and tell the boss that we finished the project or whatever it is. But there's no involvement with each other because you're just acquaintances. But when you're in a relationship, we see that through the example of Kardama and Vibhuti, that there's this interlock between them, where there's a strong sense of supporting each other's advancement in life. Where here, through these verses, we're seeing and hearing about Devahuti's supporting Swayambhuva Manu's advancement. And later on in the chapter, we'll hear about and see how Swayambhuva Manu is then trying to support Devahuti's advancement. And naturally, as the couple gets older, as the husband and wife get older, then the focus shifts to focusing more on the spiritual duties and less on the material duties, right? This idea of Vanaprastha and then later sannyas, where you basically start giving up the material duties and start focusing on spiritual duties only. And so like this, through these verses, what we see is, through the verses, we see Devahuti and her journey through her selfless service to Kardama Muni and how that is reciprocated by Kardama Muni, or about to be reciprocated, but how his heart has melted. And through the purports, we see that Srila Prabhupada very much emphasizes about the qualities of a wife. And this is always an interesting topic because naturally then the question comes, naturally the topic then becomes about how can Prabhupada talk about the wife in this way? Like what about the husband, etc., etc. But we see throughout the scriptures, Srila Prabhupada is very much emphasizing what a man's qualities should be like. And naturally, because as we all know, we're a spirit soul, not this body, we all take that as qualities that we all need to develop. But there are certain pockets of pastimes in the Bhagavatam where Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the qualities of a husband and a wife. And they're to be taken in the right context and with the right understanding. Because if we don't understand how the relationship functions or how Srila Prabhupada is presenting the relationship, we can develop some sort of animosity or some sort of distaste for Srila Prabhupada and his explanations and the purports. And so before I end, what I'm just going to share the purport to verse 6. The very last statement that Srila Prabhupada uses is that this is not to be expected by a woman who is the wife of an ordinary person. In the past time, we see how Devahuti had basically completely neglected herself, had completely given up her own independence and given her body, mind, words, everything to the service of to the service of Kardama Muni. But Srila Prabhupada then purport, whilst he spent many verses or many purports just now from the start of the chapter talking about the qualities of a wife, he ends this section by saying that this is not to be expected by a woman who is the wife of an ordinary person. What we take away from this is that there are principles to be learnt and details to be understood. We see that there are two extremes. There's one extreme which is to some degree taken in a modern context or very much prominent in a modern context, which is where the woman wants to have a very independent life, a life without much responsibility. Even if they're married, they just want to have their own life. They want to live their own by their own rules and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, you have the misunderstanding of the Vedic literature, which is misunderstood as a wife who should be completely submissive to the husband, regardless of how the husband acts. But what we have to understand is that the principles are there to be followed from the scriptures, but the details are there to be looked at based on the circumstance one is in. In the scriptures, we see there are many, many examples where Prabhupada in the purports will speak very, very, very similar content in terms of the qualities of a wife, the qualities of a husband. But the personalities being described in the scripture are of a very, very high and pure caliber compared to what we have now. Now we are very, very conditioned. We see Devahuti's austerity and her completely neglecting herself is a very extreme example, right? She neglected her bodily care. She endured so much hardship. She completely left everything that she knew and loved and understood just to serve Kardama Muni. But equally, Kardama Muni was a great yogi. He was a great yogi absorbed in his meditation and tapasya on the Supreme Lord. And so when we look at the scriptures and these pastimes and read these purports where Prabhupada is emphasizing the qualities of a wife, and we hear about Devahuti's submission to Kardama Muni and things, we have to remember that the examples in the scriptures are very, very exalted. And so Prabhupada's teaching us the principles that we need to adopt, but we don't replicate, we don't copy, we don't mimic the details of what has happened. So here we see that the principle is of developing the qualities of pridelessness, of mutuality, of submissive service in the real sense, where it's reciprocated, but not taking on the details of the extreme submissiveness where you accept whatever hardship comes, regardless of how the husband acts or responds. And so, yeah, this idea, this essence that the humility and the mood of service is what we should be taking away. So I'll end there. I'll take any comments, questions. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Any comments, questions, corrections?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for the lovely explanation. Absolutely wonderful. We have gone into depth and telling in summarizing this chapter. Absolutely wonderful. Just wanted to say that. Thank you so much for that. And also something about, you did say about, I think in one of the verses, how devotee's father, before asking Kardama Muni, he wants to give his daughter, and he was obviously trying to show the pompous side of him, and trying to say she is the princess, and she's the sister of Uttanapada and all that. And so why was he trying to do that to a ascetic? Why was he trying to show some material pompousness to a person who's so spiritually elevated? Would Kardama Muni ever would have fallen for that?
Sorry, could you rephrase the question, Mataji?
So my question is, obviously Kardama Muni was very spiritually elevated, and over here the king knows that Kardama Muni is very elevated. Still, he is trying to, in a way, it looks like as though he's trying to bribe Kardama Muni by telling all the good qualities of materialistic qualities of the thing which Kardama Muni wouldn't have actually fallen for. But why did the king have to do that? Is it because of his
Okay.
own materialistic influence that he was trying to, or he thought? I mean, obviously, he might not be so. Obviously, he's taking Kardamani as his guru, I think, and he's as a disciple, I think. So,
So you're talking about in chapter 22, so the previous chapter where
yeah.
Swayambhuva Manu is approaching Gardamuni. Yeah. So it's a good point actually. So we see that Swayambhuva Manu basically glorifies Devahuti's position as the sister of Uttanapad and Privata, etc., and then a material opulence or position as you described. The way to see it, or at least the way I'm seeing it and the way I understand the Bhagavatam, is that oftentimes these descriptions are given, like even in Vedic concept, when one person is approaching another family for their daughter or their husband, their son's hand in marriage, a description is given of the background of the family, of the origin, because what it does, it paints a picture of what sort of qualities and character that person would carry. Because naturally we see, I mean, the modern concept of if you tell me your 5 closest friends, then I'll tell you what sort of person you are, what sort of qualities you have, right? So if your 5 closest friends are devotees, then chances are that you're also going to be a devotee or spiritually minded. If your 5 closest friends are going to the bar every single day, then chances are you're also going to be attracted to that sort of, environment and culture. So what Swayambhuva Manu was doing here is trying to paint a picture of who Devahuti is by giving Kardamuni a picture of who Devahuti is associated with, who she's related to, because everybody knows Kardamuni would have heard of Uttanapad, of Priyavrata, because of their qualities and their rulership, etc., etc. So it's just painting that picture so that Kardamuni can get an understanding of Devahuti's qualities. On the offset, it looks very material, which I completely appreciate. But stages and personalities, when they're really looking at relationships, they go a lot deeper. They see that this is what it looks like on the outset, which then they infer to mean something deeper. And that's the biggest thing, I think. Because even if you go, I don't know if it still happens in India, but like we hear about from Prabhupada when he talks about how marriages were in India 50 years ago, etc., then we see that it's very much based on, okay, the families come together, the astrology is looked at, the family background is looked at, etc., etc., because it's all painting a picture of what that family is like and therefore what to expect from the woman or the man. I don't know if that helps or answers.
I just wanted to bring out a conversation because we were talking about how obviously when there's a partnership in marriage, man and a woman, and the Prabhupada tries to say that it is among equals, and also in Bhagavatam is written as among equals rather than a man and a woman, because all of us, when we look at it, all of us are we carry our body, which is like man and woman, but in spirit, all of us are females. Okay. So my question of view was trying to say, like, I was trying to compare like how the king, Swayambhuva Manu, is trying to he's building a partnership with Kardamamuni, but at the same time he's trying to tell, I'm so and so, I'm so and so, oh, my daughter is so and so, so and so. So I was just trying to bring that in context, but it doesn't somehow equate over there. But the man and the female women thing is very much, people don't understand nowadays. People are very materialistic, thinking that man is superior and woman is inferior, but it's never like that. All of us are spirit souls, so we are equal in so many ways. Of course, depending upon our karmas, what we have done, but we are supposed to look at each other equally, and that's what Krishna says in all of the Bhagavatam, that everybody should be saman. Nobody should be belittled in any way. So that's lovely. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Just wanted to comment. It was a lovely class you gave today. Really.
Thank you. I do just want to share one thing, right? So I'm just bringing it up. So chapter 22, right? So this, where is it? Here. So this is the section that you're talking about where Swayambhuva Manu is speaking to Garda Muni, he's basically just appreciated that, oh my gosh, like I finally get to see you, such a great sage. Oh, and by the way, my daughter, Devahuti, is sister of these personalities which are very famous. She's searching for a good husband. And interestingly here, suitable husband in terms of age, character, and good qualities. Not in terms of any of the material things that we look at or people in modern day context look at. The moment she heard from the sage Narada of your noble character, learning, beautiful appearance, youth, and other virtues, she fixed her mind upon you. Again, we see that the focus is on the character. And nowhere in this section do we see or hear Swayambhuva Manu talk about how he's the emperor, how he's got so much land, how he's the king of all this kingdom. All he's focused on is, you've heard about the character of Priyavratha and Uttanapad. My daughter is actually their sister.
Yeah. Okay.
So-
It doesn't say character, does it? He says, he just says, about Priyavratha and Uttarapada. So a person can think materialistically or whichever way they want. So he just left it open a bit, but it looks like as though, because, they are the kings of all of the universes. So in a way, try to say they're powerful. And so it comes out as they're very powerful. And also she is, obviously he's not the woman. When you look at materialistically, obviously Kadamuni understood because he's already been enlightened by God anyway, about quality, and obviously he will agree to it. But he was listening to what Govindam was saying. Thank you, Prabhuji, for bringing out the chat. Okay, wonderful.
That's
Thank you
nice.
so much.
Anyone else? If not, then Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu, or I don't know. Do we guys usually just end, or is there something? Oh,
We normally say Vaishnava pranams at the end, and then we close the session. Prabhu. Thank you so much for facilitating today's class. Hare Krishna.
thank you for the opportunity.
You can say the Vaishnava pranam. Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpatirubhischa kripa sindhubhevcha patitanam pavanebhyo
Pavanebhyo
vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
anantakoti vaishnavindaki
Vaishnavrinda ki
Jai.
jai, Srila
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai,
Jai.
Srimad
Srimad
Bhagavatam.
Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. Thank you.